Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right, hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. On this show, we interview a lot of recovering addicts, people who have overcome adversity, people who have changed their lives. Today, a close friend of mine was asking me, hey, I know someone who wants to be on the podcast. He told me, he overcame drugs and he'd be great as a guest. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, but I don't really know this person. I can't have someone on the show that I don't necessarily know or who isn't, recommended by somebody I know that someone hasn't known for years, anybody can come up to me and be like, hey, I got a good story, So I met you through Christopher G, shout out to Chris G. And he told me, as soon as I told him I had this podcast, from day one, he's like, you got to get Jesse. And I was like, okay, cool. And he put us in a group chat and we met. Jesse, your book, no bullshit. I wanted to wait until the podcast to tell you, it was so good. I read a lot of books. Probably read a couple hundred books in my life. I've read a lot of drug addiction memoirs. And I don't really like drug addiction memoirs because they're corny or they don't get clean. A lot of the drug addiction memoirs, I remember I read A Million Little Pieces, great book. But at the end of the book, he just looks at a bottle of alcohol and dumps it down the drain. And he doesn't explain how he gets clean or what how uncomfortable the first couple of years are adjusting to society. And a lot of books are like that. And your book was I listened to an audiobook. And I remember wanting to take the long way to keep listening to it. And that's really rare. I want to keep hearing the story to see what happens. And it was entertaining. It was raw. It's exactly what Hell Has an Exit's about. It was that good.
Fuck. Sorry, I'm just having to pull it together. Especially people that know me know that I don't have a problem crying, but that means a lot, dude.
And I got clean young. So it's there's not that many people who got clean as a teenager that have stayed clean and accomplished, what you've been able to accomplish. And writing a book is one of my dreams, So to see somebody else, I went to your book signing, it's different when a celebrity writes a book. But when somebody from the program that we know people who know you, who people have seen you grow up, when someone from our community writes a book, it means something to us, because I tell people all the time, bro, this isn't about getting clean. It's about being in recovery, And this is what Step 12 is about. This is Step 12 right here, right?
Well, thank you, dude, seriously. And thank you for having me on your podcast. More than anything, for the validation, not that I'm seeking that outside validation, you bringing me back to purpose and intent behind me wanting to write my book, having gotten clean young. Because you're right, a lot of people don't tell the story of the journey of recovery and what happens. There's the horrors of addiction, there's how I hit bottom, but our journeys in recovery and how we evolve. And how we go from being homeless, sex workers, to graduating from Harvard. And that process. And coming from another man of color, another Latino man, who is straight, and I'm not. There's always that fear for me of being rejected, especially by my cisgender, heterosexual brothers in the community, even in recovery. And the fact that you were able to connect from a place of hope that we do get clean, there's not many of us writing books and telling our stories. And your story needs to be told.
I appreciate that. And look, that's why I do the podcast, because it's sometimes I listen to stories on TikTok and Instagram or whatever. And I'm dude, I know people with crazier stories. Just work normal jobs. Like I know people that, like maybe she's just a waitress now. But if you knew her story, you wouldn't understand how crazy it is that this girl's even a waitress.
Exactly. That she's not just a waitress, but
it's like
to get that person there and be able to
get the driver's license, to show up to the court dates, to get her kids back.
Right.
So it's like, I see in recovery, we see so many crazy stories that we get numb to like normal stories, Your story, for anyone that's not, I just want to showcase the book. So the book is called I'm Not Broken, Jesse Leon, a memoir, is about you being Latin descent, obviously, living in South California.
San Diego,
having a crazy, crazy drug addiction story, but a story of not just getting clean, but like you said, graduating Harvard and becoming somebody and losing that stigma or trying to lose the stigma, which is like a constant thing because like, I have 14 years clean. There's times where I walk into a room and I still wonder if people are going to know that I'm a drug addict or that I don't feel like I fit in or like my opinion's not going to matter as much or, like the disease is still there. So your story means a lot because it shows people that, you could just get clean. That's great. But you can also get clean. You can dream. Like it's okay to have big dreams.
Right.
So, hey. So let's start with your story. Where are you from?
So, thank you first because that was the reason I wrote the book was to inspire hope in others to not give up in spite of how dark life can get sometimes. And also for our families. Because we all have that cousin, that nephew, that brother that just ain't gonna, that you're just like, damn, he ain't never gonna get clean. That was me. That was probably you.
Yeah.
And so to inspire hope in others to not give up, but also to show that recovery is possible and that we talk about old dreams reawaken. Well, sometimes we don't know what the hell to dream. Sometimes we don't even know what's out there and what's possible. And so in my book, I talk about these like moments of magic, right? Of people coming into my life at exactly the right time to kind of steer me in a certain direction that eventually got me to graduate from Harvard. And what I don't talk about, because the book starts and ends at Harvard graduation, I'm hoping that one will be able to do an adaptation of the book into a young adult version, because it's too graphic and I think too raw for a young adult market.
I think it could have been more graphic.
Oh, wow, that's funny.
But I do think that because I think about my book, like if I write one, and I'm like, how graphic do I want it to be, But the reality is, like, I'm a professional, like I own a company, I have employees. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So yours was like, because sometimes a book can feel like someone's being graphic just to be attention seeking,
right.
And your book was really good at it being unapologetically real and it also being vulnerable and not coming off as graphic.
I reflected on this like last week because that's been coming up a lot. And it did get edited down a lot. But I've had some people say, why were you as graphic as you were?
I feel like it was a 6.5.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, but I also wonder it's because we're in recovery. Right.
Yeah,
so we live through this, right?
Someone's 15.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but there's this piece about, so once I graduated Harvard, and I hope that I'm able to write a second book on what happened after Harvard and my trajectory from graduating from Harvard, going into the field of philanthropy, creating demonstration projects across the United States to rebuild cities. I mean, I invested in East Baltimore, Detroit, East Oakland, Wynwood in Miami, Liberty City, Allapattah, downtown Tampa, like there's Philadelphia. I worked in philanthropy to help redevelop urban areas and create economic opportunities for residents that live there. Then I became a real estate developer, and I built over 5,000 units of housing, over $2 billion in investments. And then I went back into philanthropy, helped create some dope programs, mostly in Florida and the Southeast. And now what I do is I manage multi-million-dollar investments for high net worth families and institutions for social impact. And so how do you go from this, being a homeless sex worker.
Can we talk about it? Because I want to. I know you don't want to like give away the book, but like I want to hear about like how you grew up and what it was like, how you got into drugs, the gift shop.
So I do recommend that the listeners do pick up I'm Not Broken. A lot of my heart and emotion was put into this. The audiobook is sick. The audiobook is amazing.
Yeah, so having a podcast, I've become like a snob with sound. And I listen to other people's audiobooks. And I'm like, who the fuck recorded this? Because I guess I listen now to how audio sounds. Mm-hmm. And I can appreciate when someone's audio quality is like a museum quality. It's like a high end. And like your audio was high end. It sounded great. It sounded like a professional person put it together.
They did, and I'm actually...
Because sometimes you listen to some audiobooks and you're like, was this recorded on an iPhone?
So. No, I was blessed. I was blessed that Penguin Random House really invested on the right team. The engineer was a Latino. He actually worked on the Spanish one that we just finished yesterday. So the Spanish version comes out November 22nd. And it's called...
Your Spanish?
Oh, my Spanish is perfect.
It's better than your English?
Oh, almost.
Oh, but your English is better than your Spanish.
It is, and that has to do with, Spanish was my first language. We weren't allowed to speak English in the home. So my mom and my dad were of the mindset of, you're going to learn English when you go to school, but in the house you speak Spanish.
Yeah, my parents tried to do that with us, and I was not having it.
Yeah, and so... But growing up, at one point, and it talk about it in the book, when my mom finds out about the sexual abuse, not knowing how to really translate that into Spanish.
That was crazy to me because let's start from the beginning. I need to know about the beginnings. Like, what was it like growing up? What area did you grow up in? What was your household like? And how did you start getting involved in, I guess, did the drugs come first or did the sexual abuse come first?
All right. So born and raised in San Diego, predominantly around downtown at a time where downtown wasn't, if you've been to San Diego, we have the gas lamp district. And it's all gentrified, a lot of beautifully restored Victorian homes that San Diego is known for. That was the hood. And that's where, it was now Little Italy, but it wasn't called Little Italy then. And we had that. The Victorian homes were where all the poor Mexicans lived. Always grew up in the geography between Southeast San Diego, downtown, and Little Italy area. So very urban. And by day, it was the business district. By night, it was a red light district. Loving, nerdy, caring kid.
So, because you had an older brother who was the opposite of you, right?
Yeah, my older brother was, light skin, golden brown hair, muscular, played football, soccer, was always out riding bikes, fixing bikes, helping my dad fix the car. Yeah, my dad, my brother was the tough guy. And so he would help my dad fix cars. My dad would try to get me to hand him a wrench. I'd give him a plier. He'd ask for a plier. I'd give him... a screwdriver, and you start screaming at me, pinche bueno pa nada, vete a ayudarle a tu pinche mamá, which is like, you good for nothing.
Yeah.
Go help your mom. But I loved helping my mom. And I wish I could pull up my phone.
Yeah, because that was like a cute part in the book.
Because, I literally was a little Mexican nerd. I had my hair parted to the side. Back then, the trendy glasses that we wear now with the thick frames weren't cool.
Yeah.
RuPaul wears them now, and all these folks wear them now. But back then, those were the welfare glasses. If you were poor, you got the big, ugly black and brown frames. I would be sitting on the floor in our little tiny apartment with an encyclopedia, a National Geographic magazine that I would get from the library, and a dictionary. And I'd be on the floor and losing myself in like Turkey. And I would be researching the underground cities of Turkey.
Wow.
And then I'd go back and forth to the encyclopedia. And if there was a word I didn't understand, I'd go to the dictionary. And then my brother would come by and he'd kick me in the ribs and be like, get the fuck out the way, you fucking nerd. I hope I can cuss.
Yeah.
All right, because, I...
Cussing is encouraged.
And so he would bully me, and he started the trend of calling me nerd. The original title of the book I'm
nerd.
not broken was going to be nerd.
Oh, that's cool.
And I changed it to be an acronym of never ending resilience and determination. That's what I wanted nerd to be. They said that the term nerd brings up an image of a white techie individual that has since been vindicated by Silicon Valley. And so I'm like, no, it's still not okay to be a young kid of color that is nerdy. And it's okay, because we don't really see that in mainstream media. You don't see it in hip hop. You don't see it in music.
Yeah, you don't really see like a black nerd, a Hispanic nerd.
Right, we have Manny from Modern Family, or we have Urkel.
Urkel, there you go.
And that's it, right? And and we still, I think with Encanto that came out from Disney, you have the first main character on a Disney cartoon that wears glasses. But you don't see superheroes wearing glasses, right? They become the superhero without glasses. So,
Unless you're Clark Kent, and the glasses are a disguise.
And the glasses are a disguise, right, of being a nerd.
Yes.
So I was this nerdy kid, and I would love helping my mom cook. I'd help her wash clothes. And my dad would just criticize her for that. My mom loved me. I would tie my shirt. I would get my shirt. I'd tie it in a knot. After watching Wonder Woman, especially when I found out that Linda Carter was Mexican, I would tie my shirt in a knot and spin around in the living room like Wonder Woman, right? And my mom would laugh with me. But there was this underlying tone of, don't let your dad catch you doing that.
Wow.
And so I went from being the smart, nerdy kid to one day having a water balloon fight, having a water bucket fight.
You?
I'm 11 years old.
Okay.
We were having a water bucket fight. A bunch of the guys in the neighborhood sent me to a store to go buy water balloons. They put their money together to buy water balloons. And
let me ask you a question. Would you be like feminine with your mom and then like at 11 and then like tough with the guys outside? Or at that point in time, did you not really have that type of concept?
There really was. I knew I was gay. I knew that. Well, no, I didn't know I was gay. I knew that I would have boy crushes as a kid, but I didn't understand what that was, right? Because you're a little boy.
You would know that you were attracted to the guy when you watched TV or something.
But then at the same time, I'd be a kid, and the guys are playing football or basketball, and I'd be staring in awe. And I wouldn't know if I was staring because I was like, damn, he's cute.
Yeah.
Or was I staring out of admiration because one day I wanted to be like them?
Yeah, like, oh, he's jacked. Yeah,
like, damn, he's jacked. Like, I want to be like that.
Okay.
But you're a kid. So there was no sexualizing anything.
Gotcha.
I was an innocent child that wanted to just come into my own identity of whether that was, you know, the non-gender binary was not a thing back then. You're either a boy or a girl. And if you're a Latino boy, you're supposed to be doing the things my brother was doing with my dad. It wasn't okay to be cooking in the kitchen with my mom. We didn't have cooking shows back then. We didn't have cooking competitions, right? You didn't see that on TV.
Yeah, you didn't see men cooking.
You didn't see men cooking, especially men of color.
Yeah.
And so I was confused. I always felt that I didn't fit in or belong. In my neighborhood, at school, in community, at home, I wasn't like my brother. I couldn't get my dad's love and support. The only time my dad we'd feel connected is when we'd play chess before we went to bed. And my dad would make me play chess, and he would make me do math equations. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, since as far back as I can remember. But one day, I get sent to Safeway to go buy water balloons. Safeway doesn't have any. The guy at Safeway tells me to go to this gift shop. Not in my book. And I walk into a gift shop that marked my life forever. I got sexually abused by the owner of the gift shop. He threatened me.
How old do you think he was?
Him?
Yeah. When you were 11.
Oh, God. He must have been 35 to 36. He looked like Freddie Mercury. So when the mustaches got trendy a few years ago and people were rocking the big mustaches, I would get triggered left and right.
Wow.
Especially in the workplace. It was a white guy who looked like Freddie Mercury, and then a few months later, I don't know if it was his lover, his partner, an African-American guy would watch the store when other men were brought in. So what started off as sex abuse.
And just so people know, like this guy locked the door, physically hit you, and there was like a closet in the gift shop,
So it was a gift shop that had,
like a storage closet.
yeah, so when you walk in, it had like knickknacks and toys and gifts, like any, like, you know, like a gay Hallmark. And along the back, they had gift cards aligned the wall, like, you know, along the wall. And as you go to
was it a gay gift shop?
So
Or it was a gift shop that just happened to have gay stuff?
it was a gift
like-
shop in the gay part of town.
Wow.
That I'd never been in there before, but that's where they sent me,
And
the
you
guy
just
from
didn't know. You
Safeway.
just a
And you know, and I
11-year-old
wouldn't care
kid.
anyways, right? I'm
Yeah.
a kid, right? So
Yeah, you're just trying to get some
just
water
walk in,
balloons.
trying to get water balloons, right? And so along the side of the cards,
Wow.
I see that there's an adult card section.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my brother would sneak into the Playboy channel.
Okay.
You know, at 7 years old, my brother's
Yeah.
10, and we'd try to watch boobs through the squiggly lines. And so I start opening these cards and I'm looking around and I start seeing these naked girls on these like happy birthday, big boy kind of shit, right? And then the cards get more risque as you go farther down the aisle and they become these trifold birthday cards. And there's men and women in sexual poses. And I'd never seen a naked guy. So there's an image of a guy.
That was the first time.
I'm 11 years old. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, but like-
maybe like in
No, I know.
the you know, YMCA after getting out of the pool, or in the Boy Scouts you're gonna shower, but it wasn't like
a sexual thing.
looking, right? And it wasn't a sexual thing. All of a sudden I'm
This was
looking
the
at
first.
these.
Well, it's interesting to me because like the first time you saw a person naked sexually, and you got molested the same day.
Because, you
and
know,
abused.
on Playboy back in the day, and even I don't know how it is now, but it was that soft porn.
Yeah.
They never showed the guy's dick. They never showed the penetration. So it was the first time seeing like an erect penis, right? And I'm 11 years old, and I'm like, oh my God. And my heart is beating. My palms are sweaty. I'm a super Catholic, nerdy kid. I feel like one side there's a devil telling me keep looking. The other side there's like the angel on this side telling me get the hell out of here, get on your bike, go home, go say an Our Father, a Hail Mary, ask for forgiveness, go to confession, tell the priest what you did, and find forgiveness.
Wow.
You're not supposed to be doing this. Get out of here. And so as I'm looking at these cards, all of a sudden I feel the shopkeeper's hand on my shoulder. I freak out. I drop the card and he picks it up and he says, "That's a big dick, isn't it?" And I'm like, I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. You wanted water balloons. They're actually in the back storage room. And I talk about this in my book. It says they're in the back storage room. They're on a box on the floor. I'll be right with you. So feel free to go back there.
Hey, now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. What can someone get from trying therapy? Unload stress, emotional healing, help with anxiety and depression, and much more. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/exit today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/exit.
And so I go back there. It's a back storage closet with shelves and a bathroom. And there's all these boxes on the floor that are taped up. And I'm a little Mexican, nerdy, loving kid. I was taught you don't open anything without permission. I'm not about to go open all these boxes. So I'm looking and try to see which one it is. And when I'm in there a few minutes, and so before I have the courage to open one, I turn around to go ask the guy for permission. And he's standing in the doorway. That becomes a very violent sexual interaction. I get my ass kicked. He threatens me. He lets me out, tells me to go back or he's going to kill me and find out where I live and kill my family. And so when I left, I got back to the house, and I don't talk about it in detail in my book, but my mom saw how beaten up I was and freaks out, runs to me, and I'm telling her and my brother and everyone that I fell off my bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wearing shorts. My brother looks at my knees, and they're not scraped.
Mm-hmm.
So he looks right at me, and I remember this so perfectly because he looked at me like, you're a fucking liar. You didn't fall off your bike. You got beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
But I was too afraid to say anything. A few days later, I go back, keep going back, and then about a few months into it, so they started getting me high.
Wow.
So a few months into it, they started bringing
just
other...
so people know, so the shopkeeper is basically saying you need to come back here once a week or I'm going to kill your whole family. And you don't really, you don't know who to tell or whatever, and you keep going back there.
Every 2 days.
Every 2 days. Wow.
And so I go back, and
they start giving you drugs.
They start inviting other men to join in the back room of the gift shop, and they get me high for the first time, smoking weed. It's funny, I could say just smoking weed now, right? But you're an 11-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So your first exposure to... I'm already confused about my sexuality. I'm looking at these nudie cards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's happening inside of me with seeing this naked guy on a card. Shopkeeper catches me. I get sexually abused. I get threatened. I blame myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time I blamed myself. He smelled the gayness on me.
Mm-hmm.
I blamed my mom, that had she not supported me in being that little nerdy loving kid, had she not allowed me to help her in the kitchen, had I been forced to do the manly things like my brother was doing and not encouraged to do the girly things, that maybe the shopkeeper would not have been able to smell my softness, my gayness, and none of that would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I blamed myself for years.
And your mom, wow.
I hated my mom.
Wow.
Yet I loved her and didn't want to hurt her, which is why I never said anything. But I blamed her for a very long time because for loving me for me, for wanting me to just be Jesse. Because I found out years later in conversations, with my mom, that her mom would grab her by the ear, drag her into the house and beat the shit out of her for playing marbles with the boys in the neighborhood because my mom was a tomboy.
Wow.
So it was completely the opposite. And my mom wanted me to just be the best me I can be. But I blamed that for creating the situation of my sex abuse.
Wow.
Of a way only an 11-year-old kid could process.
Yeah, and just so people know, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to have fun and smoke some weed. It was like hardcore sexual abuse for years.
So this went on for about 3 years. In that transition, I rejected everything about being nerdy.
And it got like worse and worse.
Oh, it got totally worse and worse.
So it's like...
And I just want to say to anyone listening, so part of trauma-informed care and being in therapy over all these years and doing EMDR, doing brain spotting, doing parts work and doing talk therapy, doing CBT and DBT, I'm a huge advocate for mental health and therapy. What I talk about in my book is how the system failed me. And we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But part of trauma-informed care is being able to talk about it without reliving the experiences, and that's what's hard. That's what's hard. So if you ask me a question and I say, I'd rather not discuss that because it generates too much pain, that's where it's coming from. I rejected being smart, nerdy, loving Jesse. Did what all the guys in the neighborhood were doing and became a wannabe cholo. A cholo, I think you guys call them chongos in Florida.
I don't think we call them anything. I don't think there's like a term in Florida for like a thugged out Hispanic person.
Because you have chonga for the girls, which is a chola out there, right? But I started wearing size 36 Dickies, creased out, my Kmart corduroy slippers. shaved my head back, started training my hair to grow back. I started having peach fuzz, started looking like a little wannabe homeboy. Started being extremely a class clown, acting up in school, fighting constantly with my mom, and thought that becoming hyper masculine would hide the fact that, so that anyone would ever find out that 2 to 3 days a week I'm going to this gift shop having sex with multiple men by force. And that I was being sex trafficked and sexually exploited as a child.
Yeah, so now the gift shop worker is actually pimping you out.
Yeah, and
so one, it's pedophilia, underage.
Right.
Two, obviously unwarranted, whatever. What would you say to some? Because like I've had other people that have been on the show that have been held captive by pimps and whatever, and beaten nearly to death, and then told, hey, if you fucking leave, we'll get you and whatever. And then a lot of people are like, I don't know, like, why couldn't you just leave? And I don't think people understand the psychological warfare that happens when someone is sexually abused, then physically abused for years, and then told that they're never going to be shit, that they're not good enough, that no one would even believe you, that if you went to the cops, we would kill you. And it seems like if someone told me that right now, I would be like, fuck you, are you crazy? But when you're in a vulnerable, butt naked, raped position, someone could tell you something and you kind of believe it, you know?
And so when I became this wannabe cholo and started hanging out with guys and had that support system, because I was already getting high with the shopkeeper and his buddy, I started getting high in school, you know, and I'm in 7th grade now, 11 going on 12, and then I turned 12 in 7th grade. And so because I started hanging out with the homeboys, I got this false sense of pride and courage that I stopped going to the store.
Yeah.
And one evening, he shows up at the house and he's there outside the apartments and he points to his watch. And I'm like, you know, you get punched, you're like beaten up, you're like, oh, fuck. And you're scared. And I went back and once again became extremely violent. And then the mental mind fuck behind how it happened, and threatened to kill my mom, and even said that he spoke to my mom. And so I don't want to give away too much of the book, right? But it talks about that hellhole that I had to live for up to 3 years. And then something happens, I get in an altercation, I almost kill this kid, I black out. I was that little angry wannabe, and I say wannabe because I was a wannabe. I never got jumped into any formal gang or any of that stuff, right? And I beat up this kid. And as I beat him up, I blacked out. And all I could see were the faces of the shopkeeper, his buddy, and other men. And I'm beating up this kid and I'm smashing his head against a stucco wall and there's blood everywhere and I get handcuffed. And then that changed my life forever. So the authorities get involved. And I'm supposed to go into this victim witness program, victim advocacy program. The state's gonna help. They convinced the boy's mom to not press charges. And as long as they can show proof, they can show proof that I'm getting help, which is a total violation of HIPAA laws, right? Yeah. How it all happened and played out was totally messed up. Should have never happened. And so then I have to tell my mom that I'm being sexually abused. And I don't speak English perfectly. I speak homeboy English, right? Slang. And I don't speak Spanish perfectly. And in Spanish, we don't have a word for molest. Molest means molestar.
Which means like someone bothered. Yeah.
So I'm trying to tell my mom that I'm being bothered sexually. No social worker, no psychologist. The police officer just drops me off. Bloody clothes. And my mom has to sign like this giant stack of papers in English that I have to help translate to get me the help that I need.
There's multiple times in the book where you can see where there is a window of opportunity for authoritative, some type of system to step in and help you. And you see constantly in the book that it's almost like, no way. Like when you read it, you're almost like, there's no way you told this lady what was going on. And she kind of was like, well, if this is true, like their whole attitude was like, super unprofessional and just like, it's hard to read. That's probably one of the hardest parts to read is that there's somebody who 14 years old and he's confessing that this is going on. And you can see instantly that you're regretting even saying anything because no one believes you. Now you're going to have to deal with this and you're not getting help. You're not being treated like a victim at all.
When the detectives came to pick me up at school and they're questioning me without a parent present, without an adult, they told the principal to leave the office and then forced me to go identify the store. And all this is going on. And I'm, now I can reflect back and be like, that was wrong. That should never have happened. That should not have happened, which is why I also wrote the book. Because even now, I believe that our mental health system still addresses situations in silos. You work in substance abuse. Oftentimes, mental health, substance abuse, and trauma are still addressed in silos and in isolation. Very rarely do we address all those issues together. And I got assigned a therapist, and she was getting paid $125 an hour back in 1988 when my mom was only making $4.25 an hour, the minimum wage, as the lunch mom. And so for 4 years, I'm seeing this therapist who knows about the sex work, who knows about not even sex work, man. I'm 14 years old. The authorities get involved. We go, I take the detectives to the store. Perpetrator disappears. I'm now a dope fiend because, by this time they've given me coke with weed, which we call primos. So I'm smoking primos in the store. I'm sniffing coke. Crystal wasn't really out yet. And so my supplier's gone. So I'm 14 years old. I did school. I go to Balboa Park, which is, the famous Balboa Park with the San Diego Zoo. It's a huge area for the sex trade.
So just to paint the picture, so you have a kid who's abused for years, goes to authorities. The guy who works at the gift shop disappears. They kind of don't believe you at all now.
Detectives never came back.
Detectives never followed up on it. They never checked payroll. They never questioned the owner of the gift shop, whatever. But now you have an addiction, and now you have the sense of, well, this guy was making money off me, pimping me out. Why can't I just make my own money and get my own drugs?
I was handed off to the state. So we got him the help. He's now a part of the state. We have him in therapy. He'll be fine. And I often wonder what would have happened had I not been a little Mexican kid. Had it been a little white kid from like a rich school, would he have been surrounded by all the resources? The reality was I wasn't. And so my therapist, who was getting paid money, didn't do shit. So I turned to street prostitution when I find out what's going on at the park.
When you turn to street prostitution, are you still telling your therapist that that's what you're doing or no?
His therapist knew everything, man. She knew about the drugs.
So she knew that.
She never did a damn thing. For 4 years, never recommended drug and alcohol treatment. Never recommended. My mom asked.
She was just like,
mom asked for family sessions. She wouldn't do it. And I talk about this in my book, man. I remember her pulling out those like blots, those
ink blots.
Those ink blots, and what do you see here? Shit like that, right? Drawing assignments. And as if I'm 8 years old, but I'm 14, 15, 16 now. She never once recommended drug and alcohol treatment. I didn't know about programs like Phoenix House until I got clean. And so
Not just that, it's like when someone is underage and they're talking about prostitution or something, like you get the cops involved immediately. You know what I mean? Like,
now.
Yeah, it's like,
now.
It doesn't, now.
What happened to me, I'm hoping would not happen now, but I still see too many young people of color dealing with substance abuse, dealing with sex trafficking, dealing with the realities that a lot of people still deal with, not getting the resources that they need, and oftentimes not believed. And if you do try to get help, people don't know how to help you. And
they don't want to be responsible, so they just brush it off. Because you see it again with the police officer who dropped you off. And even though I understand, like when that incident happened, when the police officer was gonna tell your mom, and then he didn't, and he just dropped you off at the
Not
house?
his responsibility, right? Like police
But at the
officers,
same time,
police
it's like-
officers aren't trained to be social
At
workers,
the
and that's
same
the whole
time,
debate
it's
right
like,
now.
even though that seemed like the shittier thing to happen to you is like get arrested and whatever, that's textbook what he should have done.
Right.
He wasn't being a nice guy by letting you off and not telling your parents.
And the funny part about it is, I was so appreciative to him for being there. And I talk about how he was the first Latino man who I told about the sex abuse to.
Yeah, and I think that you did it in a way of subconsciously being like, help me.
Like reaching out for help.
Yeah, because I used to do that when I was using. I would tell somebody what was really going on in hopes that, and like the back of my head, you're sabotaging, you're using. It's like it's
totally crying and reaching out for help.
Yeah, you're crying and reaching out for help, but you're doing it in like, man, fuck you. Like I already, like, in like this way, don't you know that I smoke crack or my parents don't give a fuck or whatever? And you think that this guy's going to tell my parents.
So you have the cop there, and then you have a social worker that walks in, or a few days later, detectives, and the first thing out of their mouth is language like alleged sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Well, you beat up a white kid, you're probably making this up to not get locked up or get in trouble. So then once again, you're not being believed. So why the fuck ask for help?
Yeah.
And when you don't know what's available, you just don't know. And so
your addiction gets worse and worse and worse. You start using crystal, a lot of other drugs. What was it like getting clean? And what got you clean?
Man, you want me to give away the whole damn book, bro?
Okay. So tell me what the first year was like.
So as I talk about in my book, I'm Not Broken. Long story short, 11 and a half, I get sexually abused, start getting pimped out in the sex trade. 14, I'm already a dope fiend. I turn to street prostitution to support my drug habit. 16, I become a sex worker. I run away from home. I'm living in LA, in East LA, and I'm turning tricks on Santa Monica Boulevard and Hollywood Boulevard. And at 18, I end up pretty much homeless, sleeping in Balboa Park, under a bush, weighing 135 pounds, engaged in extremely affordable, low-paying sex work to support my drug habit. And that's where I ended up. And so I had a girlfriend. She gets in a fight with me and throws the yellow pages at me and says, you have a drug problem. And I don't know where, I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know. Somewhere along the line, I must have heard of Narcotics Anonymous. And I think it was in junior high where, where people in NA do, PI, right?
Yeah.
Right. PI, it's not HNI really, but, you're doing more PI. I looked up, I found Narcotics Anonymous, and I called the NA hotline. This dude answers the phone, and I'm like, hey, Holmes, my homegirl thinks I got a fucking drug problem, Holmes, but I ain't no dope fiend, I just want to keep smoking weed, Holmes. So he starts laughing, because that's how I talked when I got clean. He tells me where to go to a meeting, and I go to my first NA meeting that night, and this guy, really famous in recovery, was speaking.
Welcome to the Genesis House powered by the United Recovery Project. Located in sunny South Florida, we offer drug and alcohol addiction treatment as well as a major focus on dual diagnosis. Our addiction therapy programs include behavioral therapy, 12-step facilitation, psychotherapy, life skills training, and more. At our facility, you can expect a low client-to-staff ratio, daily group therapy, weekly one-on-one therapy sessions, and luxury amenities such as volleyball, basketball, pool, chiropractor, personal trainer, yoga, massage therapy, and more. Contact the United Recovery Project today and let's create a better tomorrow.
I looked like a homeboy, obviously. My beanie down to my nose. I wore a beanie everywhere, dude, which in New York is called a scully, or a skull cap. But I wore my beanie everywhere. And the farther down my beanie was, the more uncomfortable I was. So it was a way like my armor, right? Dressing like a homeboy in my armor. And I remember he said, I walked in right when the readings were happening, and I was uncomfortable, and they got to the part of the readings where it said, it's not about age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. And then he starts telling his story, and people start laughing at some of the crazy shit he was sharing. And I was like, what? And then he started talking about finding hope in recovery, and I started crying. I found this sense of hope in that first meeting, but I didn't stay clean right away. There weren't young kids of color getting clean.
When I talked to Chris, I was like, I like make jokes like, oh, it's easy for you to get clean or whatever. And he's like, he'll look at me. I remember this one time he was like, bro, you gotta understand. I stayed clean for years without even seeing another young person.
That's how I felt. And that's why, like, in the back of my book, it says, and I struggled with this line in the back of my book, on the bio of the cover, because it says something about being the lone kid of color, from being the lone young person of color in Narcotics Anonymous meetings, coming to terms with his own sexual identity, to becoming an engaged mentor for incarcerated youth. Leon found the will to live with love and support of his blah, 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 right? And so, but that is how it felt. And I was known as Little Jesse in San Diego. Like, I was a little fucking Chicano kid, right? Getting clean in San Diego, and there wasn't. What, Drew Barrymore was going to meetings in Hollywood? There weren't young kids of color knocking down the doors of Narcotics Anonymous. And so I didn't stay clean. But there's something important about the process of recovery. You asked about my first year. My first year was the hardest year of recovery. And I think part of the reason I've been able to stay clean is I never want to repeat year one ever again. Kicking on my own was not cute. I didn't know about treatment, dude. I got clean because my girlfriend made me call the NA hotline, and I went to my first meeting and I kicked in and out of meetings. I was constantly fidgeting. I was that one kid in meetings. I was that person in meetings. I was always moving his legs, always fidgeting. I had to have something in my hands at all times. So my addiction became styrofoam cups. And everyone that knows me, even still to this day in a meeting, if there's a styrofoam cup, I will tear it apart into little tiny pieces because I need to have something in my hands. And so from that first meeting to my last night using, well, this guy, this speaker, right, starts talking about sponsorship. I'm an 18-year-old kid from the barrio. So I'm thinking, sponsor? Yo, somebody's going to pay me to do these steps. Like Little League, right? You will get a sponsor. So I asked him, I was like, hey, Holmes, so where do I, like, find a sponsor, eh? Because, you know, I want somebody to pay me how to do this. And he's laughing, and he's like, ain't nobody going to pay you, man. Like, just, you know, keep coming back. So they tell me to go to this meeting in the barrio. And I go to this meeting in the barrio. This black dude is celebrating 6 years clean. And, you know, he kind of looks like Debo from Friday. This kind of mean-looking black dude, you know, buff, creased out. You know, he shared a story. And then this Chicano guy, older guy, is celebrating 13 or 14 years clean. And he reminds me of like an uncle I never had. Kind of calm, kind of speaks with a Chicano accent. And I'm like, I tell my girlfriend and another friend we were sitting with, I'm like, that Chicano guy's gonna be my sponsor, eh? And our homegirl says, why don't you ask the black dude? Man, fuck that black dude, eh? What's he gonna teach me about a recovery? I'm from the barrio. I need a Chicano, man, to like teach me about the steps, Holmes. So I go up, and it's in the book, it's my favorite scene. I go up to the front of the meeting to you know, ask the Chicano guy to be my sponsor, and I'm not remembering anything. I rehearsed the whole thing in my head of what I'm gonna ask the Chicano guy. So as I get close to him, all these NA people cut me off at the pass to like tell him celebration, right? Happy birthday. And so I'm stuck in this big hall in the barrio, large meeting, and I'm looking around and I'm like, oh shit, who's standing next to me but the black dude? And he looks at me, he's like, hey, what's up, little man? And I look at him and I'm like, oh, fuck, Holmes. I said, hey, Holmes, beanie down on my nose, all gangster, right? Wannabe gangster. I'm like, hey, Holmes, my homegirl over there told me to ask you to be my fucking sponsor, eh? And so he gets the NA schedule. He says, here's my phone number. Here's my beeper number. Call me tomorrow, and you're going to call me for 30 days straight, and we'll start you on step 1. That man taught me how to be a man in Narcotics Anonymous. And that man loved me unconditionally. And that man taught me how to build a foundation made of stone in Narcotics Anonymous and in recovery. And he taught me, because he lived the principles, that it wasn't about age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. But I still struggled. That came later.
Mm-hmm.
So from that first meeting to my last night using, I hit bottom.
I think that was like one of the most memorable parts of the book, is that when I read the last time you used, like we talk about it in the meetings, like remember your last high or whatever. When I read that, I remember like thinking like, wow, like next time I see Jesse, like I'm going to hug him. Like it was that bad where it was like, holy fuck. The fact that like you called your sponsor and have been clean ever since.
So one of those moments of magic in my life was, I don't want to give it away, obviously, right? But I got brutally raped that night, and I got thrown down a second-story townhome naked into the streets, and no one would stop to help. And I'm a kid. I'm beaten up. I'm bleeding from everywhere, and no one stops to help. And I'm trying to grab my clothes, and I'm putting my clothes on as I'm trying to run down the street. I get to downtown, and I often wonder what would have happened to me had my sponsor not picked up the phone. It was around 11 o'clock at night. What would have happened if he didn't pick up the phone that night? And he picked up, and I remember crying. And I remember saying, how the fuck did my life get here? What did I do to deserve all this fucking shit? All I wanted to do was be a kid.
Mm-hmm.
All I did was go buy water balloons. How the hell did my life go from being a loving, nerdy kid who loves reading National Geographic magazines to all the fucked up shit that happened to that night? And he picked up the phone, and I was like, and I didn't tell him what happened. I was just crying and saying, I don't want to live like this anymore. Why does this shit keep happening to me? Why does this shit keep happening to me? I don't want to live like this anymore. And he said, you don't have to. He said, you don't have to, little man. That's what he would call me,
Mm-hmm.
or Jess. And he said, you lost the war, man. Not just the battle, but the war. Let me walk you through the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, man. I love you, and you don't have to live like this no more. And I remember hearing that, and that was my last night using. I got home. I walked into a McDonald's across the street from San Diego City College, still there. I cleaned myself up in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I walked out, ignoring everyone that was staring at me. And I got home, took a shower, and fell asleep. And that was my last night using. And that was my clean date's March 12th, 1993.
Wow.
And I was 18 years old. Then the work began. I started working my step work.
So I have someone that I guess we're friends. He's been clean like 2 years, right? But he's like refused to work the steps. And I keep trying to explain to him, like, bro, I understand how great being clean is, but like getting clean and not working the steps is like saving up your whole life to buy your favorite exotic car and you just keep it in the garage. Like, it's like you did all the work, all the hard shit. And then like the real part that like the reason why you're clean gets unlocked through the 12 steps. And I don't think that I would have any of this shit if it wasn't for the steps.
I wouldn't either.
I think if I got clean and I didn't work the steps, I would just I wouldn't even think about how I could impact other people. Like my whole personality. That's what step 12 or step 11 is about, profound personality change on how we think and feel and interact with other people. To me, getting clean and not working the 12 steps it makes me sad. It's like getting the acceptance letter from Harvard and never going.
So it's funny because in my book, pre-edits, I went through all my steps.
Mm-hmm.
It was as if I was speaking at a convention, right? And it was edited out. And I understand why it was edited out. And I understand not trying to violate traditions, so I couldn't really quote the steps exactly.
Yeah.
But we did still jump into some of the step work. People that have read the book and have known me professionally but didn't know me in my drug use, they met me now post-Harvard.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, damn. Part of the process for me and the change, it's all in the steps. The freedom was in the steps. And, therapy and all that came, later for me.
When did you go to professional therapy after you were clean?
So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I remember I had about 11 months clean, and my negative, self-deprecating thoughts started coming back. Man, fuck NA, fuck recovery. Ain't no young people like you coming in here. Your life is gonna be boring. You're not gonna be able to party no more. You're an 19-year-old kid now. You're Chicano, and everyone's partying it up, and you're like boring, dude. Your life is gonna be all about meetings, smoking cigarettes, going to Denny's and coffee shops after meetings, and eating apple pie, and that's what your life is gonna consist of. Damn. This is some boring ass shit, right? So my sponsor, he picks me up. I tell him, like, I don't think this recovery thing is for me. I don't see young people really. I see some in the beach area, but they're all white. I can't relate to them. Their families paid for treatment. That's not where I come from. I think I'm just gonna go back to like living my life, man, because this recovery thing is not for me. And he gives me a speaker tape. And he reaches in his glove compartment and he says, here, it's a speaker tape of this kid who was speaking at a convention. So he says, I want you to listen to the speaker tape. I got home that night. I put on my Walkman, put on my headphones, and it's a story of this kid. And he's talking about getting clean young. And yeah, totally different stories. But I needed to hear the story of someone else getting clean young and staying clean, and their process of being in recovery and working the steps. And I didn't meet him. I would listen to his cassette tape every morning on the way to school. And I would listen to it on the way home from school. And he gave me hope that I could stay clean. And then I was finally able to meet him about a year later at a convention, or around 8 months later at a convention. And that was a whole funny story about how we met, because he thought I was trying to beat him up because I looked like a big old gangster, wannabe, right? Wannabe cholo. And I just hugged him. And I hugged him, and I cried, and I cried. And all I could say was, thank you. Thank you for doing that speaker tape so many years before, because you helped me stay clean.
Yeah, and he told me, so obviously I'm good friends with him, and he told me, he's like, dude, I spoke at this convention. There was probably 4 people there. And I was like, when you speak at a convention, there's like a main speaker, and then there's like workshops, and then, there's smaller meetings. And he was probably speaking at this small meeting, probably a handful of people there. And his tape somehow made it to you. And
Years later.
Years later. So it's like, that's kind of my goal with the podcast.
You never know the impact you're gonna have, or the purpose.
It could be years later. Dude, this is going to be online forever. So it's like, I get messages all the time from people who are like, dude, this woman messaged me the other day. She's like, I'm a truck driver, and I listen to your podcast when I'm driving the truck, and I don't have time to go to meetings. I hear stories from people who are like, dude, I used to think 12-step meetings were totally whack, and I started going. There's a kid in Florida. He said he's from New Jersey or somewhere, and he's like, dude, I listened to your podcast, and where I'm from, meetings aren't like there ain't no young people there. So he got on a plane, flew to Florida, and just started going to meetings from the podcast, So it's like, my goal is to have so much proof that the program works that it's undeniable. My biggest thing is when I started going to meetings, I no longer could say, oh, well, I can't get clean because of this. Or, oh, it's hard for me to get clean because I'm young. Oh, it's hard for me to get clean because I don't have any money. Oh, it's hard for me to get clean because no one supports me. Or when you go to meetings and you see all these people that get clean from nothing, you can't go home with an excuse no more.
There is no excuse.
I don't have a car. We'll drive you.
Right.
I don't have money. It's free.
Exactly.
I don't feel like staying clean. Neither did I. It's like it destroys every ounce of weaponry that like the disease has prior to
I was
that,
at a
you
meeting
know?
yesterday and somebody was sharing about recovery being really hard, and somebody got up with some time afterwards and he said, recovery is like sex, it only gets good when it starts to become hard. And it was
Amen.
funny, right? Because I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because a lot of my growth has come through those difficult times and being able to stay clean. But there's also a lot of growth in the joy and good times in recovery, because I had to learn how to have fun. When you get clean young and you've experienced all the traumas that a lot of us experience when we get here, we need to learn how to have fun again, how to laugh.
And sometimes it takes a year.
It took me a long time.
I don't think I really knew how to have fun until I had like 18 months clean. My first 18 months clean, I went to meetings, I went home, I was miserable. I went to meetings, I went home, and I was miserable. And then at 18 months clean, I was like, oh, you know what? I want to go skydiving. Oh, well, I just Google how much skydiving is, $350. All right, I'm going to save up $350. Oh, and then I'm going to group chat 5 of my friends and see who wants to go. Oh, yeah, I'm down to go. We're all going to go. And it's like when you're using, you can't even make plans. You know what I mean?
That's funny.
When you're using, you can't even have an idea and put it into action.
Right.
But when you're clean, I think it took me 18 months to be like, I can think of something and put it on a calendar and fucking work towards it and do it.
The first experience, and damn, I don't want to give away the whole book, so I'm Not Broken. Please get a copy. Support, someone in recovery, debut Latino author. I talked about going to volleyball, NA volleyball.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there's this kid. There was not even a kid. He's 19. I'm 18. Buff ass dude, good looking, and from New York with the accent. And he convinces me to go play volleyball. We don't high five in the barrio, right? So I had these dicky.
That was so funny when people was like, "Good job, dude." And
good job, bro. Right on, dude. And I'm like, what the hell? But after a while, I started laughing.
Yeah.
And I started having a good time. And so I had to learn. For me, I did have to learn early on. And even though they weren't Chicanos from the barrio, I found other young people in recovery that went to both fellowships. So I would go to AA because that's to socialize, and that's where the young people were.
That's funny.
But my recovery was in NA.
In Florida,
my
a lot of
step
people do
work
the
was in
opposite.
NA.
Yeah.
My hanging out, my sponsorship, and so it was a trip because then you got the diehard recovery folk that it's one or the other. You know what? Nah, man, I had to find it where I had to find it. And I learned how to have fun and be young. And we would go dancing together. We'd go to clubs together. And if one person felt uncomfortable, everyone would leave, no questions asked.
That's cool.
And we would hit coffee shops and play pool. Like, it became fun.
Yeah.
Shit that I never did, right? But I kept going to school. And so I wanted to go back to your question about when I started getting back into therapy. And at one point, it was around the time I started my 4-step, because I was really confused about my sexuality. I had a girlfriend. She brought me to my first meeting. She stayed clean. And I was just confused about who and what I was. I never had the chance to come to my own without drugs. My first sexual experience was by force. And then drugs stepped in. So getting clean, what we don't talk about a lot, we talk about it in men's meetings, which is a lot of fun, but learning how to be intimate without dope, without drugs was a whole process. My girlfriend would touch me and I'd jump. And so all these triggers started coming back. And so I decided that I wanted to be celibate. And I took 12 months of therapy, no booty calls, and just focused on me. And I would drop little hints to my sponsor, this mean-looking black dude who looks like Debo, about kind of being confused, man. And I remember when I finally told him, I'm like, I don't know if I'm gay. I don't know if I'm bi. I don't know what I am. And he's like, and you don't gotta know. Like, I love you, Jesse. And I'm here through your journey to help you figure it out. And that's the kind of stuff that a lot of people in recovery, especially the men, don't talk about, is the sexual inventory and the traumas that sometimes we experience, or our own issues and challenges
Or
with
even
identity.
go to outside help and go to like actual therapy. Because
Right.
the steps are great, and I wouldn't be here without the 12 steps. But at some point, I think you need to broaden your horizon and go see an actual therapist.
So I started in there. I went back to therapy. I got lucky because the state reinstated my program. They reinstated it, and they helped me pay for therapy. And I went back to therapy, and from, I think, 11 months clean until I transferred to UC Berkeley.
Wow.
And so...
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to ruin the whole book, but it's incredible. You went to Berkeley and then you went to Harvard, and it's like, I think you're the only person I've ever met in my life that's a Harvard graduate. I don't think I've ever met anybody who like actually graduated at Harvard. You got an incredible story, Jesse, and I hope we can continue to share it. I hope that this brings more exposure to you and your book.
Thank you. And you know, the beautiful part about recovery for me, and that I hope your listeners or your viewers take away, is we talk about old dreams reawaken. We talk about, you know, hope being real. Sometimes a lot of us don't even know how to dream, right? We don't even know what's possible. I didn't know what was possible, but I stayed open and allowed others. I stayed humble and I remained teachable. And by remaining teachable, I was able to listen to other people's suggestions. I didn't know about the GRE.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to get my master's. I wanted to move back to San Diego after I graduated from Berkeley, get a job, you know, teaching at, you know, City College or something. Well, you can't without a master's. Teaching in juvenile hall. And the opportunity arose to do a fellowship. I did a fellowship that paid for a large portion of my graduate school. I didn't know what fellowships were. I didn't even know that they were available. It's not like people in NA were telling me, you should apply to this fellowship. Yeah. Other students taught me what was possible, and I remained open, and I just did the footwork. And when somebody said, and she's in my book, she said, you should apply to Harvard. I'm like, I'm never going to get in. I had a 3.9 GPA, and I wrote my statement of purpose, or my personal essay. I didn't hold anything back. I didn't talk about the sex trafficking and all that, obviously, but I got in.
Amazing.
And the whole world became available to me because of recovery. And, you know, it's kind of like God said, you know, here, do you want it? And kind of like, boom. And me just grabbing it and being like, yeah, I want it. I want to live my life today. And what's come from it is a beautiful world fucking opened up to me. And it still continues to open up. After Harvard, I went to UPenn, 2 Ivy League institutions. We are smart people.
That's so dope.
We're smart people. Live your dream. Suit up, show up. And sometimes even the impossible all of a sudden becomes possible. Look at you.
Hey, thank you.
You're doing what I would love to do one day. I would love to open up some LGBT sober living homes. I want to open up some, you know, I want to do a podcast maybe one day. Maybe I'll write another book. And, you know, part of my journey is to help other people achieve their dreams. And I hope that when you decide to write your book, that I can be right there, right alongside with you, man, helping you out.
Hey, thank you so much, Jesse. And it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
I hope so, bro.
Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.